I won millions in the lottery and decided not to tell anyone. I asked my family for help as a test. Most of them suddenly couldn't lend a dime, but had no problem posting vacation photos. Only one person actually lent me a hand. Buckle up, Reddit. This is going to be a long one, but I promise it's worth the read. 3 years ago, my life changed forever, but not in the way you'd expect. Yeah, I won the lottery, but the real story is what happened next when I discovered who my family really was. Some backstory first, because context matters here. I, 36 male, live in Columbus, Ohio, and for most of my life, I was what you might call the extra sibling. Not the golden child, not the black sheep, just the forgettable middle kid that nobody really paid attention to. You know the type. Decent grades, stayed out of trouble, but never quite good enough to earn the spotlight. I worked as a diesel mechanic for a freight company, pulling 12-hour shifts in freezing garages, fixing big rigs. My supervisor was one of those old-school guys who thought screaming at employees was effective management. The pay was just enough to keep a small roof over my head in a duplex that had seen better days sometime around the Clinton administration. Now, my family situation was complicated. Let me introduce you to the cast of characters that made my childhood and young adulthood so delightful. My older brother Derek is 39 and has always been the golden boy. Our parents helped him buy a construction business right after college. Not a loan, mind you, but straight-up gift money for equipment, down payments, the works. This guy drives brand new trucks every couple of years, constantly posts those cringy, hustle and grind motivational quotes on Facebook, and genuinely believes he's a self-made success story. The cognitive dissonance is stunning. He acts like he built his empire from nothing when the foundation was literally paved with our parents' cash. Derek's the type who name-drops the cost of everything he owns in casual conversation. Yeah, just picked up this $80,000 truck, but you know how it is when business is booming. No, Derek, I don't know how it is, because some of us actually had to build our lives without a trust fund. Then there's my younger brother Kyle, who's 31 and still living in our parents' basement. He's perpetually between opportunities and always working on the next big thing, which translates to playing Call of Duty until 3 a.m. while mom brings him sandwiches cut into triangles, like he's still 7 years old. Kyle has this way of making unemployment sound like entrepreneurship. Every few months, he's got some revolutionary app idea or cryptocurrency scheme that's going to make him millions. Spoiler alert, none of them ever pan out. My sister Sarah is 33, a single mom working part-time at a hair salon. She's raising her 8-year-old daughter Emma, basically on her own, after her ex decided fatherhood wasn't for him and moved to Phoenix. Sarah struggles to make rent every month, but she never complains. She's the type who'll post pictures of Emma's school projects on Facebook with captions like, "So proud of my little artist," while wearing the same 3 outfits on rotation, because she spends every spare dollar on her kid. And then there's me, the invisible one. When I lost my apartment at 28 because the landlord sold the building and didn't renew any leases, guess who didn't get offered a couch to crash on? That's right, the family that had a whole finished basement going unused except for Kyle's gaming setup. Instead, I spent 6 weeks sleeping in my truck in various parking lots around town, showering at the 24-hour gym, and trying to maintain some dignity while my life fell apart. The breaking point came a year later, when my truck's transmission died. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an existential crisis. No truck meant no way to get to work, and no work meant no way to fix the truck. I was looking at a $3,200 repair bill with about $180 in my checking account. So I swallowed my pride and called Derek, explained the situation, asked for a loan, not a handout, a loan with interest and a payment plan. I even offered to work extra hours at his company to pay it back. Derek listened to my whole sob story, then started laughing. Not a chuckle, but full-blown laughter like I just told him the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Maybe," he said between laughs, "it's time you accept that you're just not cut out for much. Some people are built for success, and others, well, others are built for other things." That sentence lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. For years afterward, every time something went wrong, every time I struggled, I could hear Derek's voice telling me I wasn't cut out for much. I ended up taking a payday loan at 400% interest to fix the truck. Spent the next 8 months paying it off, eating ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches to make ends meet. Fast forward to 3 years ago. It was a Friday night in February, and I'd just finished one of those shifts that makes you question your life choices. 12 hours of crawling under frozen trucks, getting hydraulic fluid in my hair, and listening to my supervisor blame me for problems that existed long before I clocked in. I stopped at a gas station on the way home, partly for gas and partly because the heater in my truck was acting up and I needed a few minutes in a warm building. The place was nearly empty, just me, the cashier, and some trucker grabbing energy drinks for an overnight haul. I had exactly $47 in my wallet, which had to last until the next paycheck. Gas took $35, leaving me with $12 for whatever food I could scrounge up for the weekend. But there, sitting behind the counter, was a display of scratch-off tickets. Now, I'm not usually a gambling man. I'd bought maybe 5 lottery tickets in my entire life, and they were all worthless. But something about that night, maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was Derek's voice still echoing in my head. Maybe it was just the cosmic joke of being 33 and having $12 to my name. made me pull out a $10 bill. "Give me one of those $10 tickets," I told the cashier, pointing to a game called Millionaires Club. He handed me the ticket and a penny to scratch with. I usually would have waited until I got home, but the truck was cold and the store was warm, so I scratched it right there at the counter. First box, $500,000. Okay, that's the grand prize amount. Nothing unusual there. Second box, $500,000. Weird coincidence, but still. Third box, $500,000. My heart started doing something irregular in my chest. I checked the rules on the back of the ticket, read them twice, then 3 times. 3 matching amounts wins that amount. I had just won $500,000. But wait, it gets better. Because when I looked more carefully at the ticket, I realized I was reading it wrong. This wasn't a $500,000 prize. This was a $20 million prize, which after taxes came out to $13.4 million. I stood there in that gas station for probably 5 minutes, staring at the ticket, waiting for the number to change or for someone to tell me it was a mistake. The cashier asked if I was okay. The trucker asked if I needed to sit down. I mumbled something about needing air and stumbled outside to my truck. Sitting in the parking lot with the engine running, I stared at that ticket until my eyes hurt. I took pictures of it with my phone from every angle. I Googled the Lottery Commission's phone number and called their 24-hour validation line, punching in the serial number with shaking fingers. "Congratulations," the automated voice said. "This appears to be a winning ticket. Please contact our office during business hours to begin the claim process." I drove home in complete silence, not even turning on the radio. In my apartment, I put the ticket in a Ziploc bag, then put that bag inside another Ziploc bag, then put both bags in a fireproof safe I'd bought years earlier for important documents. Then I sat on my couch and stared at the wall until sunrise. The lottery office opened at 8 a.m. on Monday. I was there at 7:45, first in line, wearing my cleanest jeans and a button-down shirt I'd bought for a job interview 2 years earlier. The process was surprisingly straightforward, but took the entire week. Lawyers, financial advisors, tax specialists. Suddenly, I had a whole team of professionals whose job was to make sure I didn't blow through $13.4 million like one of those cautionary tales you see on reality TV. My financial advisor was this no-nonsense woman who'd been managing lottery winners for 15 years. First thing she told me, the money won't change who you are, but it will reveal who everyone else is. We set up a trust, diversified the investments, created multiple income streams. Conservative estimates put my annual income at around $600,000 without touching the principal. Even if I lived lavishly, the money would last forever. But here's the thing. I didn't want to live lavishly. Not yet anyway. I kept going to work that whole week, kept living in my crappy duplex, kept driving my beat-up Silverado. The only difference was that I'd catch myself smiling at random moments, like when my supervisor would scream at me about productivity quotas, or when I'd see Derek's latest Facebook post about his empire, because I had a plan forming in my head, a plan that would answer a question that had been eating at me for years. If I really needed help, if my life depended on it, would my family be there for me? I was about to find out. 2 weeks after claiming the lottery, I started my little experiment. I called my parents first, figuring I'd start with the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. "Dad," I said when he answered, "I need to talk to you about something serious." I told them my shop had been cutting hours for months, and they'd finally laid me off. I said my truck's transmission was acting up again, and this time the repair would cost more than the vehicle was worth. I mentioned that my landlord was raising rent, and I couldn't afford the increase on unemployment benefits. My dad listened to the whole story, then launched into a lecture about tough times building character and how real men find a way to make things work. My mom chimed in with helpful suggestions like, "Have you tried praying about it?" and "Everything happens for a reason." When I directly asked if they could help me get back on my feet, maybe let me stay in Kyle's old room for a few weeks while I job hunted, the conversation got uncomfortable fast. "Son," Dad said, "your mother and I are on a fixed income. We can't be supporting grown children who should be supporting themselves." This from the man who'd written Derek a $75,000 check for business equipment just 3 years earlier. "We'll pray for you," Mom added, "but you need to learn to handle your own problems." I thanked them for their time and hung up. 1 down, 3 to go. Derek was next. I called him the following evening, right around dinner time when I knew he'd be home. "Bro," I said, putting on my best desperate voice, "I'm in real trouble here." I gave him the same story. Lost job, broken truck, eviction looming. I asked if maybe I could work for his company, just temporarily, while I got back on my feet. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know what? I might have something for you." My heart jumped. Maybe I'd misjudged him. Maybe blood really was thicker than water. "I need someone to clean the office and workshop after hours," he continued. "It's $8 an hour, maybe 15 hours a week, just so you're not sitting around feeling sorry for yourself." $8 an hour. The federal minimum wage was $7.25, so technically he was being generous with that extra 75 cents. "Derek," I said, "I was making $22 an hour at the shop. I've got 15 years of mechanical experience. Don't you have any actual mechanic work?" "Look," he said, and I could hear that condescending tone creeping in. "Beggars can't be choosers. Take the janitor job or don't, but stop expecting handouts just because we're related. Handouts. Like asking for work was the same as asking for charity. I told him I'd think about it and hung up. Kyle's response was exactly what I expected. Dang, bro, that really sucks. I'd help if I could, but you know how it is. Yeah, Kyle, I know exactly how it is. You're 31 years old and your biggest expense is Xbox Live. But Sarah was different. I called her last, partly because I was hoping I wouldn't need to drag her into this test, and partly because I already knew she'd try to help even though she couldn't afford to. Oh my God, she said when I finished explaining my fake crisis. Why didn't you call me first? Before I could answer, she was already making plans. Could I come over that night? Did I need food? Did I have warm clothes? I don't have much, she said, but I've got $60 in my emergency fund, and you can have it. And my couch is always open for as long as you need. $60. This from someone who was choosing between groceries and gas money every week. Sarah, I can't take your emergency money. Yes, you can, she interrupted. That's what family does. We take care of each other. She drove over that same night with the cash, a bag of groceries, and a container of leftover spaghetti and meatballs. She made up my couch with her own sheets and pillows, gave me a spare key to her place, and told me not to worry about anything except getting back on my feet. That $60 was worth more to me than all $13 million in the bank. While my family thought I was struggling to find work, I was actually building something I dreamed about for years. Using a shell company, I bought a small warehouse on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, just 8,000 square feet of concrete floors and high ceilings. I converted it into a custom truck and off-road vehicle shop. Not just repairs, but full custom builds. Lift kits, performance engines, custom paint jobs, the works. It was everything I'd wanted to do, but never had the capital to attempt. My first two employees were Dave and Manny, guys I'd worked with at the freight company. These were the co-workers who'd given me rides when my truck was in the shop, who'd covered my lunch when I was broke, who'd actually treated me like a human being instead of a nuisance. When I offered them jobs at double their previous salary plus full health benefits, Dave literally started crying. Manny asked if I was serious 3 times before he'd even look at the contract. How did you get the money for all this? Dave asked, gesturing around the shop. I got lucky, I told him, which was technically true. Setting up the business took 6 months of careful planning. Business licenses, insurance, equipment, inventory. I had to learn more about entrepreneurship in 6 months than Derek had learned in his entire pampered life. The best part was how invisible I remained. Everyone knew the new shop existed, but nobody connected it to me. I was just some guy who disappeared after getting laid off, presumably moved to another city to find work. Meanwhile, I kept playing the struggling unemployed brother when I had to interact with family. I'd show up to Sarah's place every few days, always looking slightly defeated, always grateful for whatever help she offered. She never once made me feel like a burden. During one of these visits, she mentioned that Derek's business was starting to have problems. Customer complaints were increasing, projects were running over budget, and he'd had to let 2 guys go the previous month. He's stressed all the time now, she said. The other day he snapped at Emma just for being a kid. I told him if he ever talks to my daughter that way again, family or not, we're done. This was interesting information. Very interesting. About 8 months into my unemployment, I did something that felt better than winning the lottery itself. I bought Sarah a house. Not a mansion, nothing that would raise questions, just a modest 3-bedroom brick house in a safe neighborhood with good schools. It had a fenced backyard where Emma could play, a 2-car garage, and most importantly, it was in a school district that would give Emma opportunities Sarah had never dreamed of. I had my financial advisor structure it through a dummy corporation, then had my lawyer approach Sarah with a story about being selected for a single mother housing assistance program that covered the full purchase price. Sarah was suspicious at first. She's not naive, and free houses don't just fall from the sky. But when my lawyer showed her all the official-looking paperwork and explained that she'd been recommended by someone who wished to remain anonymous, she broke down crying in his office. The day she and Emma moved in, I happened to drive by while they were carrying boxes. Sarah saw me and ran over to the car, practically bouncing with excitement. Can you believe this? She said, gesturing at the house. Emma's going to have her own room with a window that looks out on the backyard. And there's a bathtub, not just a shower. I haven't had a bathtub in 5 years. Watching her happiness, knowing I was responsible for it, was worth more than any revenge I was planning. By the 1-year mark, Derek's construction business was in serious trouble. Social media posts about success and grinding had stopped entirely. The shiny new truck had been replaced by a 3-year-old model. Word was getting around town that his company was missing deadlines and going over budget on every job. That's when he called me. Hey, little brother, he said, using a tone I hadn't heard from him in years. The fake friendly voice he used when he wanted something. I heard you might still be looking for work. I'd been unemployed for almost a year at this point, living off what family assumed were unemployment benefits and odd jobs. I'm listening, I said. My business is, well, let's call it in a growth phase. Lots of opportunities, but I need someone I can trust to help me take things to the next level. I was thinking maybe we could be partners. Partners. That was rich. What kind of partnership? I asked. Well, I'd still be the primary owner, obviously, since it's my company and my reputation on the line. But I could see giving you maybe a 5% stake in exchange for a significant investment. How significant? 400,000 should do it. It's a bargain, really, considering what the company's worth. $400,000. From someone he thought was unemployed and desperate. Derek, I said slowly, where exactly do you think I'd get $400,000? I don't know, man. Bank loan, investor, whatever. You're a smart guy when you apply yourself. Figure it out. The audacity was breathtaking. And what would I get for this investment, besides 5% ownership? Experience mainly. Learning how to run a real business from someone who's actually successful. Think of it as paying for an education. I told him I'd think about it and call him back. Instead, I spent the next week having Derek's business thoroughly investigated. Financial records, client satisfaction surveys, outstanding debts, pending legal issues. I wanted to know everything. The results were worse than I'd expected. Derek owed money to suppliers, had 3 different clients threatening lawsuits, and was about 6 weeks away from bankruptcy. His $400,000 investment opportunity was actually a desperate attempt to stay afloat. But here's the thing about desperate people. They make stupid decisions. I called Derek back and told him I'd found an investor willing to put up the money. We agreed to meet at a steakhouse downtown to discuss terms. Derek showed up to dinner in a leased BMW that probably cost more per month than most people's rent. He ordered the most expensive steak on the menu and spent the first 20 minutes telling me about his latest vacation plans and some new equipment he was thinking about buying. I let him talk, ordered a modest meal, and waited for him to get around to business. So, he finally said, cutting into his $60 ribeye, tell me about this investor of yours. He's someone I've been talking to, I said. Very interested in construction, has cash available, and is looking for the right opportunity. What's his background? Various businesses. He likes to stay low profile. Derek nodded like this made perfect sense. Smart. I'm the same way. So what are we talking about here? The full 400. He'd prefer to buy the company outright, I said. Sees more potential in ownership than partnership. Derek's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Buy it outright? This company's worth millions. How much exactly? At least 2 million, maybe 3. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and slid it across the table. Derek's expression went from confidence to confusion to shock as he stared at the screen showing a balance of $8.2 million. I had it appraised, I said quietly. Professional evaluation, 3 different firms. They all came back with the same number, $85,000. Derek's face went through several color changes. That's impossible. I've put years of work into this company. Years of work that led to customer complaints, lawsuits, and bankruptcy. Derek, you're 6 weeks away from losing everything. He was quiet for a long moment, still staring at my phone. How did you... Does it matter? Here's what I'm offering. $85,000, cash, for 100% ownership. You can stay on as a project manager with a competitive salary. Project manager? It's my company. It was your company. Now it's just debt and bad reputation. Take the deal, Derek, because it's the only one you're getting. Derek signed the papers 3 days later. He didn't have a choice. It was either sell to me or declare bankruptcy and lose everything anyway. The transition was swift and comprehensive. I kept the good employees and let go of the dead weight. I settled the outstanding debts and lawsuits. Most importantly, I restructured everything to actually serve customers instead of just enriching the owner. Derek's first day as my employee was educational for both of us. He showed up at his usual time, 10 a.m. because owners don't punch clocks, and headed straight for his old corner office. I intercepted him in the hallway. Morning, Derek. Your workspace is over here. I led him to a desk in the main room, right in the middle of everything. Where's my office? I converted it into a conference room. Much better use of space. His company Audi was gone, replaced by a basic work truck like everyone else drove. His expense account was canceled. His special parking spot became visitor parking. But the real change was his salary, from $120,000 a year down to $55,000. The same as the other project managers, which was actually generous considering his recent performance. This is temporary, right? He asked after I explained his new compensation package. Until you see how valuable I am to operations. Derek, I said, your value to operations will determine everything about your employment here. Perform well, and you'll be treated well. Underperform, and you'll be replaced. For the first time in our adult lives, Derek had to actually work for his money. While Derek was adjusting to life as a regular employee, I was making some other changes. Sarah had always been good with numbers and organization, skills that were wasted cutting hair for tips and doing part-time bookkeeping for small businesses. I offered her the position of operations director at a salary that doubled what she'd been making at the salon. She almost didn't believe me at first. I don't have experience running construction projects, she said. You have experience managing a household on no budget, raising a child alone, and keeping multiple part-time jobs organized. Trust me, you're overqualified. Sarah turned out to be exactly what the company needed. She instituted systems for tracking projects, improved communication with clients, and somehow managed to keep Derek from screwing up the jobs he was assigned to. Watching Derek take orders from our little sister was perhaps the most satisfying part of my revenge. For 33 years, he'd treated Sarah like she was invisible, just another family member who didn't matter. Now she was his boss, and she was better at the job than he'd ever been. Sarah never abused her authority, but she didn't coddle him either. When Derek tried to cut corners on a project, Sarah shut it down. When he showed up late, she documented it. When he complained about his new circumstances, she reminded him that having a job was better than unemployment. About 6 months into the new arrangement, Kyle started sniffing around for opportunities. He'd heard through the family grapevine that I was doing better and had even started some kind of business. He showed up at the shop one morning with a resume printed on copy paper and what I can only describe as audacious confidence. "Thought you might need some extra hands," he said, looking around at the equipment and vehicles. "I've got some ideas for improving efficiency." Kyle's resume was a work of creative fiction. He'd listed entrepreneurial ventures as his primary experience and described his basement gaming setup as remote digital marketing operations. "What exactly do you think you could contribute here?" I asked. "Well, I've been researching the industry, and I think you're missing some key opportunities in the digital space. Social media marketing, online customer acquisition, that sort of thing." This from someone who's never held a job for more than 3 months. "Kyle," I said, "this is a construction and custom vehicle business. Our clients care about quality work, not hashtags." "That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps small businesses small," he replied, apparently unaware that he was lecturing someone whose small business was already more successful than anything he'd ever attempted. I told him we were fully staffed and didn't need additional help. He left disappointed but not defeated. Kyle's optimism is impervious to reality. By month 8, Derek was struggling. The work was harder than he remembered, the hours were longer than he was used to, and the lack of special treatment was wearing on him. It all came to a head during a client meeting. Derek had promised a client we could complete their project in half the time it would actually take, apparently forgetting that he no longer had the authority to make such commitments. When the client called to confirm the timeline, Sarah had to explain that Derek had misstated our capabilities, and the realistic completion date was twice what he'd promised. The client was not happy. They came to the shop for a face-to-face meeting, and let's just say they expressed their displeasure loudly and in detail. Derek tried to deflect blame onto miscommunication and new management procedures, but it was clear to everyone present that he'd simply lied to try to secure the contract. After the client left, I called Derek into my office. "That was unacceptable," I said. "Look, sometimes you have to tell clients what they want to hear to get the job. Then you figure out how to make it work." "No, Derek. Sometimes you have to tell clients the truth so they can make informed decisions. What you did was dishonest and unprofessional. Since when do you lecture me about business? 6 months ago you were unemployed and desperate." There it was. The real Derek, the one who'd been hiding behind forced politeness since I'd bought his company. "And now I own a successful business while you're an employee who just cost us a client. Funny how things change." Derek's face went red. "This is my company. I built this from nothing. You built this into nothing. I'm rebuilding it into something. And if you can't accept that, you're welcome to find employment elsewhere. You can't fire me. I'm your brother. I can fire anyone who doesn't do their job properly. Being my brother just means I gave you more chances than I'd give anyone else." Derek stormed out of my office and didn't come back for 3 days. When Derek finally returned, he was different. The pretense of cooperation was gone, replaced by barely concealed resentment and defiance. He started showing up late regularly. His work quality declined. He began making snide comments to other employees about family businesses and lucky breaks. Meanwhile, my parents had caught wind of the situation and were not pleased. They called me on a Tuesday evening, both on speakerphone for maximum impact. "What's this we hear about you humiliating your brother?" Mom asked. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Derek says you bought his company just to torture him," Dad added. "Says you're making him work like a common laborer. Derek is working as a project manager, same as the other project managers. If he has complaints about his treatment, he can address them through proper channels." "This is ridiculous," Mom said. "Families should support each other, not tear each other down." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "You're absolutely right, Mom. Families should support each other." Where was that support when I was sleeping in my truck? Where was it when I needed help with basic transportation to keep working? That was different. No, it wasn't. The only difference is that now I have the power to help or not help, and I'm choosing to base that decision on how I was treated when I had nothing. Dad's voice got stern. "You're being petty and vindictive. I'm being consistent. Derek is still employed, still earning a living wage, still has opportunities to prove himself. That's more support than I ever received from this family." The conversation ended badly, with my parents insisting I was destroying the family, and me pointing out that the family had already been destroyed by years of favoritism and neglect. Derek lasted another month before he reached his breaking point. He came into my office on a Friday afternoon with an ultimatum. "I want my old role back," he announced. "Full authority, executive salary, company car. This experiment has gone on long enough." I leaned back in my chair and studied him. He looked tired, defeated, but still somehow entitled. "What experiment? This whole thing where you pretend to be the boss. We both know I'm the one with the experience and connections. Give me back control and I'll consider letting you stay on as a partner." The audacity was stunning. Even in defeat, Derek couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't the center of everything. "Derek," I said slowly, "let me make sure I understand. You want me to give you back the company I bought from you, restore the salary and benefits that were bankrupting the business, and accept a junior role in the company I've spent 8 months rebuilding? When you put it like that, it sounds unreasonable, but it doesn't just sound unreasonable, Derek. It is unreasonable. Here's what I'm prepared to offer. You can continue working here as a project manager, following the same rules as everyone else, or you can find employment elsewhere. Those are your options. Derek's face went through a range of emotions: anger, disbelief, desperation, and finally resignation. You really think you're better than me now, don't you? I think I'm more successful than you now. Whether that makes me better is a different question. This isn't over, he said, heading for the door. Actually, Derek, it is. And if you decide to leave, don't expect a reference letter. Derek walked out that day and never came back. He didn't even clean out his desk, just disappeared like a bad employee who knows he's about to be fired. I heard through the family grapevine that he'd found work at a rival construction company, but as a basic site supervisor, making about half what I'd been paying him. His girlfriend, the one who'd been attracted to his success, apparently decided that dating a middle management employee wasn't as appealing as dating a business owner. Within 2 months, Derek had moved into a smaller apartment in a less desirable part of town. His social media presence, once filled with humble brags and luxury purchases, went silent entirely. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just the quiet contentment of a problem that had solved itself. 6 months later, my parents attempted one final intervention. They invited me to Sunday dinner, the first invitation I'd received in over 2 years, and sat me down for what they probably thought would be a come-to-Jesus conversation. Derek's struggling, Mom said. His health is suffering from the stress. He's lost weight, looks tired all the time, Dad added. This feud needs to end. There's no feud, I said. Derek made choices, and those choices had consequences. He's free to make different choices anytime he wants. You could rehire him, Mom suggested. Give him another chance. I gave him several chances. He chose not to take advantage of them. But he's family, she said, as if that magic word solved everything. So am I replied. So is Sarah. Funny how being family didn't matter when I needed help, but suddenly it's important now that Derek needs help. They tried several more approaches: guilt, obligation, family unity, but nothing landed. Finally, Dad played what he thought was his trump card. We're disappointed in you, he said. This isn't how we raised you. You're right, I said. You raised me to accept whatever scraps I was thrown and be grateful for them. You raised me to believe that my needs didn't matter as long as Derek was taken care of. But somewhere along the way, I learned that I deserved better. I left that dinner early and haven't been back since. While Derek was struggling with his new reality, Sarah was thriving. She'd taken to business management like a natural, implementing systems and procedures that had increased our efficiency by 30% in the first year. Emma was excelling in her new school, making friends, joining activities that would have been impossible in their old situation. Sarah had enrolled in some business courses at the community college and was talking about maybe pursuing a degree. I never thought I was smart enough for college, she told me one day. Growing up, I always felt like the dumb one compared to you and Derek. Jorge, you were never the dumb one, I said. You were just the one nobody invested in. Sarah is now making more money than Derek ever did, has a house she owns outright, and most importantly, has the confidence that comes from knowing she earned everything she has.